Well, hello plant lovers, it is Matthew in Melbourne welcoming you to my channel. Thanks for finding me here. I try to grow cold, cool, intermediate orchids in Melbourne, Australia, without any grow lights or a greenhouse or humidifiers or any equipment, really just me and them, inside, outside, or not at all. Pretty basic orchid care, plant lovers, so if that rings your bell, ring my bell and hit subscribe and the notification bell, because I post every week on a Friday, very amateur ramblings, but you never know, might help you unpick your orchid journey. And funnily enough, 2 weeks ago, I was in Miami, very close to Melbourne, Florida. Just didn't have the time to go there because I would have loved to. Anyway, plant lovers, yes, what is before us but yet another box of orchids? And I'm sorry, this might be tedious and repetitive, but it is another accidental haul, and it is closely linked to this tub of tinned peaches. Have I whetted your appetite? Well, for tinned peaches anyway, from Goulburn Valley, might give you a clue. Yes, plant lovers, last weekend, I was very kindly asked by the Goulburn Valley Orchid Club to go and give a talk on a Sunday afternoon. And it's just over 2 hours sort of northeast of Melbourne. So it's quite a journey, but a wonderful one to make, and it's beautiful country out there. So it was fantastic to go out and visit the Goulburn Valley Orchid Club and give a talk. And amongst many other things I received was a 6-pack of these amazing tin peaches. Now, for those of you not in Australia, Goulburn Valley is in the north of Victoria, and it is the centre of the Victorian stone fruit industry. So it's where you'll find, well, in fact, many fruits, but peaches particularly. There's also a lot of citrus up there too. It's a very agriculturally productive part of the world. And so Goulburn Valley fruit is quite famous in Australia. So I was thrilled to get that 6-pack of peaches, which, thank you, I am working my way through. But it's a wonderful chance to meet people and talk and to experience clubs, because as I've said many times, the best thing I think you can do to broaden your understanding of how to grow orchids is join a club. Even if you're a complete beginner and you only want to grow 2 or 3 things, doesn't matter. Go and try and find a club near you. Easiest way to do that is literally Google Orchid Club near me, or Orchid Group near me, or Orchid Society near me. And most states or countries will have an overarching sort of orchid group organization. And if you find them, you can maybe find out if there's something more local to you. And some of those groups also have Zoom meetings. So if you can't physically attend, you could certainly Zoom in. Anyway, the Goulburn Valley Orchid Club reached out to me, and I was very happy to go out and meet everyone, give a little talk. And thank you, Chris, who was the coordinator who got me out there. I was able to go and visit her collection and then exit through the gift shop. What are you to do? Given an opportunity to meet a grower, find out how they're growing things, and then shop the look. It was wonderful. Anyway, I have vowed not to buy orchids, but I did, so that vow was broken, never mind. So I thought, okay, let me tell you the whys and the wherefores of some of these orchids, because, well, just because. So yes, thank you, Goulburn Valley, for having me last week. It was really great to meet you all, and I hope I didn't bore you all senseless with my amateur ramblings. And the first cab off the rank was Trevor, who gave me, which is so generous of you, Trevor, many thanks, Maxillaria Tennopoglia. Now, this is an orchid that many of us have, and it is allegedly the possessor of a beautiful coconut fragrance. I'm just going to show you, Trevor, Exhibit B, which is my plant of Maxillaria Tennopoglia, which is one of the first orchids I ever bought, duly potted in a terracotta pot and growing, as you can see, extremely well. Now, Trevor gave me this, and he has mounted it on a piece of timber and wrapped it in paper bark, which is from an Australian tree, and there's sphagnum moss in there. So it's a very different method of growing to mine. And here's the other odd coincidence, plant lovers. So a few weeks ago, I was in the States. I was in Miami for a week at a conference, nothing to do with orchids, and I had a day free, and I popped down to the Fairchild Botanic Garden, which was wonderful. And there I saw one of the park vans driving towards me with 2 horticulturists on the back holding a giant pot of flowering Maxillaria Tennopoglia. I almost flagged them down and said, tell me the secrets of getting that thing to flower. Because theirs was, it was gorgeous. So I said to Trevor, does yours flower? Yes. Now he is in an area that is colder than me in winter, so getting really sub-zero, sub 32 degree Fahrenheit winter minimums. And here's flowers. So the other thing, I was recently at another orchid fair and someone had Maxillaria Tennopoglia in bloom, and I said, what's the secret? And she said, keep it cool, keep it moist, which is what I tried to do with this one. A mistake. Keeping it moist is a good thing. Keeping it coolish, not a bad thing. But those two things to me tend to go hand in hand with shade. No. Moral of the story is it needs brighter indirect light. Quite simple, like many orchids. The reason, Matthew, that this has not flowered is it's not getting enough light. I can affirm that too, because the week after I was in Miami, I went to New York and I was at the New York Botanic Gardens in the Bronx, and in their amazing conservatory, there were some beautiful orchids. And there, hanging up, and I'll try and drop this footage in, but it might not work, but we'll see if we can, was a hanging basket with Maxillaria Tennopoglia, and it was in bloom, and it was just your regular hanging basket. And the plant, I mean, as you can see, it's one of those sort of rhizomy plants that wants to creep. And the specimen at the Botanic Gardens in New York had basically formed a mass around the hanging basket, but most importantly, it was hanging up and it was in bright indirect light, being kept moist and relatively warm. So there you go. I don't think the winter minimum is an issue because everyone I've spoken to in Melbourne can get it to flower. The thing is quite clearly light. I have been treating it too carefully on the light front. So Trevor, thank you for this. It is so brilliantly mounted. So I've hung this up in bright indirect light and we will just see what this plant decides to do. It's putting out new growth and should be able to flower. So I am all eyes and all nose, because the fragrance is amazing, to see Maxillaria Tennopoglia in bloom. So Trevor, thank you very much for giving me that. And then after the meeting, I was able to go and visit Chris Ibbotson's amazing collection. And she is one of the members of the Goulburn Valley Orchid Club and was the one who asked me to go out there. So thank you for that, Chris. And then thank you for taking me through your grow rooms. And I actually lost count of how many really greenhouses, shade houses Chris had, although she did have a greenhouse that was warmer. Anyway, great to see how people grow things and wonderful to see things in bloom that perhaps you hadn't been able to bloom, but also just understand what you can and can't do and the boundaries you can push. So it is such a great thing to do. Join the club, chat to people, find out what they're doing. Okay, so let me take you through what I felt I couldn't leave without. Now, the first thing might not come as a surprise because not one, but two Zygopetalums. Because yes, plant lovers, I'm going to drop in this footage now. My rescue Zygopetalum has bloomed like there is no tomorrow, and it is stunning and perfumed and gorgeous. So now I think, oh yeah, I'm a Zygo specialist. I'm not, but anyway. It has led me to think, okay, now you know what they want. It is time to maybe get some more. So this one was a very beautiful flowering plant that Chris had, and it's Zygonaria, Adelaide, Meadows, Castle Creek. Now, I've made a video about zygos that have been crossed with the Gardneria genus, which are very similar. And what that crossing has done, apparently, is to make the new hybrid type, which is called Zygoneria, makes the leaves less likely to discolor with water, apparently. I bought 2 of those last year at the big Oscov Orchid Fair, quite established plants, which were not inexpensive. But Chris had this one. Now, maybe you can see that. Let me just cover myself. So there you go. It focuses for you. So you can see very, very green petals and sepals there, and a very beautiful sort of white and pink lip. So quite different to the Zygopetalum that I have at the moment. Now, interestingly, that zygo that I've got could well be a species, and that species has 3 identities: personality disorder, sometimes known as Zygopetalum maculata, Zygopetalum intermedia, and Zygopetalum mckayi. All the same, they're all synonyms. I think that could be it, because that plant came from Facebook Marketplace, and that is a species that's been grown in Victoria in Melbourne for quite some time. So it could well be that. The flowers certainly look very similar. I actually don't care if it is a form or a hybrid thereof. Who really cares? But the interesting thing is that orchid is a terrestrial and really likes moisture. It needs sort of wettish roots and plenty of air movement, but wettish roots. It grows in free-flowing, moist, mossy environments. So interesting to find out. So these little babies have the best of both types of plant, and so hopefully we'll produce something that's a bit tougher and easier to grow in terms of the leaves and has beautiful flowers. Now this second one is a cross between Zygoneria Freestyle Meadows Tyre and Zygonaria Holdfast Bay Meadow Mist. Goodness me, the names. But you can see the flower there. Very, very stripy and leopard-like. Then this one is very green. And I'll just drop in the flowers of my Zygopetalum, as you can see here. Very classic Zygo looking. So that was really exciting. And many, many thanks, Chris, for these divisions of her plant. Now, the next thing that I felt I could not live without, Slogynies. Now, I don't need Slogynies. You know that. I've got quite a large selection. I'll put my playlist up here. But I have one that's called Jannine Banks, and it's a hybrid. But it's very foliferous. It blooms 3 to 4 times a year. Incredible large flowers with a beautiful sort of daffodil jonquil fragrance. Well, this one here, Exhibit A, look at that. Look at the size of those pseudobulbs. A really chunky, juicy Slogyny. And this one is called Kirailly Ellen. There we go. So interestingly, Kirailly is a suburb, a very lovely suburb, can I just say, in Sydney, which is in fact where the Prime Minister's official residence in Sydney is. Or is it the Governor General? Or both. Anyway, maybe it's the Governor General. There's a beautiful house in Kirailly where everyone stays who's here officially on business. Anyway, there's a guy called Kevin Dawes there, and he has created many Slogyny hybrids, and this one is one of his. So he prefixes them all with Kirailly, being the suburb in which he lives, and then this one is called Ellen. And it's a cross between Slogyny Muriana and Assamica. So apparently it has flowers once a year in autumn, very upright flowers, quite open, not as big as Muriana apparently, but long-lasting, fragrant, and interesting. So I kind of wanted something that was going to do the same thing as Jannine Banks for me in terms of its very upright spray, large flowers, fragrant. I was hoping it would flower more than once a year, but never mind. And what you can see is a flower spike there, and it is, well, it's late autumn. In fact, it's early winter, so that could just be a growth, but it might also be a flower spike. Anyway, Slogyny Kirailly Ellen is now a happy member of my Slogyny family. These do so well for me here. Now, there are tropical Slogynys which want very different conditions, but the higher altitude ones, many of which are from the Himalayas, India, Nepal, cross into China and northern sort of Vietnam and low up there, they do so well in Melbourne for me. So there we go. Another Slogyny. Will keep you posted when it flowers. And you know, the other thing too is the joy of getting flowering size divisions. Really hard to come by in the orchid world, let me tell you. Now, Slogyny, have we done? No, we haven't done with Slogyny, because what do we have here? What is called here Slogyny ovalis minor. And what you might be able to see, if I cover myself, is that very, very pretty flower. So it's a sort of the flower's going off now, but it's a golden color with that very beautiful mahogany inside to the lip. Now, Chris's specimen of this was a ball. It's one of those very rhizomy plants, forms a tangled mass, covered in flowers. And the sort of the mahogany dark brown inside of the lip is very visible on these flowers. And so when you have this ball of plant covered in these delicious flowers, it really is a sight to behold. And I did say, Chris, tell me when I exit through the gift shop, you have got a little bit of that. And she did, and there it is, a stunning, stunning flower. So Slogyny ovalis, many people think it should be a subspecies of Fimbriata. Now, I made a video a few weeks ago about what was in bloom, and my Slogyny Fimbriata is in bloom. And yes, almost identical, except that one is plain. It's supposed to be white, but it's gold, whereas this one has that very distinct color on the inside of the lip. However, Q still thinks that this is a separate species, and it certainly grows in that mountainous Himalayan area, sort of Bhutan, Assam, Tibet, cross into southern China. Higher altitudes, loves the cooler nighttime minimums that we get here in winter. So this is an outside all year grower. And really, I'm just loving all these sort of rampant Slogynies that will form a tangled mass in a hanging basket, really low maintenance. And in fact, plant lovers, I would say that is the sub-theme of everything that I acquired on this trip out to Goulburn. Low maintenance, fantastic orchids. Anyway, there we go. Another Slogyny for you all. Ovalis. Okay, another Slogyny. Look at that juicy bunch of pseudobulbs. So this is when, even despite your best efforts, plant lovers, you make mistakes. Now, this one is called Slogyny Lactia, which, yes, suggests that it has flowing white flowers, which it does, which are beautiful. And I thought to myself, I'm sure I've got that. And I checked on my inventory on my phone in real time, which is up to date. And no, there was no Slogyny Lactia. And I thought, there you go, I could have sworn I did anyway. There we go, a fantastic flowering side division from Chris. Thank you very much. But it's all coming back to me now. What I remember is that Lactia is a synonym for Slogyny huttneriana, which is what I have listed mine as, which is silly of me. Anyway, so I think effectively they are the same plant, but never mind. We'll see when they bloom. Once again, these come from those high altitude regions, but further east, so more sort of Vietnam, Laos, that part of the world, rather than across further west in the Himalayas as the other ones did. But very similar conditions, high altitude, cool growing, but very beautiful pendulous white flowers. So there we go. Accidentally had the same plant because the names changed and I wasn't diligent enough in my research, which I think makes you realize that you kind of need to be up to date with name changes in your inventory, because when you Google something, yeah, it's just easier, I think. Anyway, silly me, silly me. Now, next up, a Sarcochilis, which I know I do not need, because if you've ever watched any of my videos, I have a lot of Sarcochilis. I'll link my playlist up here, but this one is an interesting hybrid. So let me just show you, let me get the label out. It is a cross between Sarcochilis fitzgeraldii and Sarcochilis hartmanii kerri. So Fitzgeraldii and hartmanii are two species. So this is a primary hybrid between two forms. Now I'm going to drop in the picture of my hartmanii. So this is a classic species orchid. It was my gateway orchid, in fact, the first one I ever bought. Beautiful flower, as you can see. It's quite a large specimen plant and has masses of flowers. But as you can also see, the flowers are quite tight. Now the thing about Fitzgeraldii is that it grows in a different area, and the flowers are more upright and the flowers are more open. And in fact, we have got somewhere the Bible of Australian Orchids. There you go. Orchids of Australia by W.H. Nichols. An amazing book. You will be able to find various editions of it online. It's out of print, but it's been reprinted so often, you'll find vintage copies. And I just wanted to read out to you where Fitzgeraldii grows, because this is pure poetry. Sarcochilis fitzgeraldii is an exceedingly graceful, free-flowering orchid. Fortunate indeed are those who have been able to visit its haunts, where it scrambles over the rocks to a length of as much as 120 centimeters, often in great profusion. Its habit is pendulous. The racemes of showy flowers are thus seen to full advantage. The ravine orchid's home is a secluded one, well sheltered by giant trees, palms, vines, ferns, and other vegetation. Doesn't that sound like paradise? But relatively low light actually, and lots of moisture. So Fitzgeraldii just has a very different flower form. So the reason I wanted this is because Sarcochilis hartmanii does its thing, which is quite pendulous racemes of flowers, and they're quite tight petals and sepals, whereas Fitzgeraldii is more upright and the flowers are more open. And in fact, there is an illustration here. You might not really get a sense of the difference, but this one here is Fitzgeraldii. So can you see how separated the petals and sepals are of that orchid? So really quite different to hartmanii. And honestly, that is the only reason I decided, Chris, I had to exit through the gift shop with that. Next up, a group of orchids I never really thought I would have a burning desire and an envy to have, but Chris's were in bloom and I thought, oh my goodness, they are the most wonderful epidendrums that I have ever seen. Now, Epidendums here in Australia, Epidendrum radicans particularly, super common, and there's forms of it in many colours, from white to orange to pink to quite red, kind of everything in between. Almost weedy, super easy to grow, can go out in full sun. In fact, I'll drop in the picture of mine right now. They're kind of on and off bloom throughout the year, really, just depends how they're feeling. And it's winter now, mine's in full bloom out there. So the orange one is super common. Now this one though is called Epidendrum elongatum, and fairy lavender is the form. And if I hold that up, can you see that picture there? It is a lavender epidendrum. And what you might not know about me, plant lovers, is that I live for lavender, for lilac, for my, I love that sort of color palette. Not strong purples necessarily, but the dirtier, softer ones. So to see a lovely epidendrum in lilac, of course, I had to exit through the gift shop with that. It's a lovely keiki that probably Chris has taken. And as you can see, there are plenty of new growths coming up here. It's also more of a compact plant, so it's not one of those really massively straggling epidendrums, which can be a little difficult to manage. It's a little stumpier, it's like a foot tall, about 30 to 40 centimeters, so great pot specimen and easier to manage. But really, it was the color of the flower that did it for me. And then another color that did it for me was this one, Epidendrum immatophyllum, and it's a white form. Very beautiful and relatively short again. So that I really wanted. The flowers are quite small and they form a cluster, which is, it looks quite different to the way that the radicans flower head is formed. So interesting. Anyway, pure white, smaller flowers, more compact form. Well, Chris's one anyway, certainly. So I really felt could not live without that. And then finally, what I couldn't live without was this, and it is a Dendrobium nobile type. Now, there's no variety name, and it's quite a blurred picture, so you might not be able to see it that clearly. But it's a beautiful, I think, deep magenta with a gold center to the lip of the flower. So classic nobile type of orchid, and I've made a video about nobile types. These are quite complex, well, not that complex perhaps, but they've been hybridized for quite some time. Many of the species ancestors, though, are those higher altitude Himalayan dendrobiums, which love Melbourne. Trick is, keep them dry in winter and you're good to go, because if you don't keep them dry enough, the new growths can rot. So I've had that issue before. So that's one of the tricks of growing Dendrobium nobile types here in Melbourne. Just keep them a little drier in winter. So plant lovers, there we go. That is the bizarre link between these orchids, me, and this tin jar tub of Goulburn Valley luscious peaches, which are luscious and they are delicious. No added sugar, just telling you, by the way. And why I have accidentally got another orchid haul, which I now have to go and deal with. Now, in fact, I'm not going to deal with it because it's winter and we're about to have a really cold spell, which is unfortunate. So what I will just do with all of these is just love them, grow them through the winter, and then in spring, decide what to do. So there we go, plant lovers. Once again, thank you, Trevor, for your gift of Maxillaria Tennopoglia in this fantastic mount, which I have already hung up in bright and direct light, keeping it moist. So I hope to see some action there. Great to hear how other people do well with their orchids. So once again, many thanks to the Goulburn Valley Orchid Club for having me out last weekend. Many thanks to Chris Ibbotson and her husband for letting me wander through all their orchids and cherry pick, which was fantastic. And to the club, thanks for having me. And many thanks for the tubs of peaches. So as you can see, can't stress again the importance of trying to find a club near you. So I was very lucky in that this was an opportunity for me, but all of these clubs do have public sales once or twice a year. And it's a great opportunity to find unusual orchids near you, but also to meet a grower and to find out how they grow particular things. And you can take some of that to apply to your own conditions and make the orchids work for you. And we'll be making orchids work for us next week, plant lovers. So if you want to know what our rambling will be, it will not be another haul of orchids because Matthew has to say no. We are moving soon, so I really am not making life easy for myself. Anyway, if you want to know what our rambling is next week, hit subscribe. I post every week on a Friday. Hit the notification bell if you want to know exactly when my video pings into the ether. And I hope all is well in your world, that your orchids are behaving, that you haven't gone as crazy as I have, and I look forward to seeing you next week.